The morning shift started in the dark. Before the sun even thought about coming up, she was already in the empty, silent building. The only sound was the soft squeak of her cart's wheels on the polished floor. She moved through the hallways like a ghost, a part of the building that no one really saw. Her name for this job was Maria. It was written right there on the badge clipped to her blue uniform. To everyone in the immigration office, that's who she was. Maria the cleaner. Quiet, always looking down at her work, a woman just trying to get by. But her real name was something else. Her real job was something else entirely. Right now, though, her real job was to push this cart and see everything. She emptied the small trash cans from each desk, one by one. She wasn't just throwing away old paper and food wrappers. She was looking. A crumpled note with a strange phone number. A receipt for a fancy dinner that didn't match a government salary. She saw the pictures on the desks, families, kids, pets, and she heard the pieces of phone calls and gossip that floated in the air. She worked with a slow, steady rhythm. Her hands did their job automatically, so her mind was free to pay attention. She noticed who came in early, full of nervous energy. She saw who stayed late, staring at their computer screen with a worried look. She listened to the secretaries complain about their bosses and the officers brag about their big cases. To them, she was invisible. And that was the whole point. The sky outside the big windows began to turn from black to a deep blue. Soon, the first employees would start to trickle in, carrying their coffee and their morning moods. She finished the last trash can in the main room and pushed her cart towards the row of private offices. One office in particular was interesting. The officer who worked there, a man with a tight, angry face, was on a list. Not the main list, but a secondary one. He had a reputation, a short temper, a mean streak. People in the office walked softly around him. She made sure to be extra careful and extra quiet when she cleaned near his door. This morning, his door was open a crack. She paused, pretending to check her supply cart. Inside, she could see him. He wasn't working. He was just sitting there, staring at his blank computer monitor, his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. He looked like a man waiting for bad news. She moved on, the squeak of her wheels sounding loud in the quiet hallway. Her mind filed the observation away. Officer Kramer arrived early, visibly stressed, agitated. The main lights flickered on, buzzing to life. The building was waking up. The spell of quiet was broken. She could hear the distant ding of the elevator, the thud of a briefcase being set down. A first loud laugh from the break room. Maria took a deep breath and let her shoulders slump just a little bit more. She fixed her eyes on the floor a few feet ahead of her cart. The confident, observing woman was gone. In her place was the tired cleaner, just trying to finish her rounds before the busy people got in her way. Her real work for the day was just beginning. It was time to listen, to be ignored, and to become part of the wallpaper. She rounded the corner towards the cubicles, her face a calm mask, ready for another day of being nobody. The day moved into its busy rhythm. Phones rang, keyboards clacked, and the air filled with the smell of cheap coffee and photocopier ink. She kept her head down, moving from desk to desk with her little handheld vacuum and a damp cloth. The officer from the private office, the one who looked so angry earlier, was now out at his desk in the cubicle farm. He was talking loudly on the phone. "No, I told you it's not good enough," he snapped. His voice was like a rough file on wood. People at nearby desks shifted in their chairs, trying not to listen. She worked her way closer, dusting the top of a filing cabinet. From the little she could hear, it was about a case. Something about a missed deadline, a file that wasn't where it was supposed to be. He was getting more and more frustrated. "Well, find it. It's not my problem, your system is a mess." He slammed the phone down. The sound made a young clerk at the next desk jump. She saw his hands. They were clenched into fists on the desk, knuckles white. He took a deep, shaky breath and got up, stomping towards the break room. She could almost feel the heat of his anger coming off him as he passed by her. He didn't see her. He never did. A few minutes later, she pushed her cart near the break room entrance. She was wiping down the water cooler. He was in there, leaning against the counter, eating a powdered donut from a box on the table. He was talking to another officer, a friend maybe, but he wasn't really talking. He was complaining. And then they have the nerve to question my procedure, he was saying, his mouth half full. Like I don't know my own job, after all I've done for this place. It's a joke. The other officer just nodded, not really agreeing, just waiting for a chance to leave. The angry officer took a huge bite of his donut. A little cloud of white powdered sugar puffed into the air. Some of it landed, like a tiny snowfall, right on the dark blue shoulder of his uniform shirt. He looked down and saw it. His face, already sour, twisted into a scowl. Perfect, he muttered, brushing at it. But that just made it worse, smearing the sugar into a faint white streak. He cursed under his breath and threw the rest of the donut into the trash can with a violent throw. He stormed out of the break room, his body stiff with rage. She was right in his path, her cart beside her. She was just finishing up at the water cooler. She needed to empty the small trash bin next to his desk. It was part of her route. She gave him plenty of room, waiting for him to pass. But his mind was somewhere else, burning with his own bad luck and anger. As he hurried towards his desk, the side of his polished black shoe caught the front wheel of her cleaning cart. It wasn't a hard kick, not a full swing. But it was deliberate, a sharp, angry shove with his foot. The cart jolted. A plastic bottle of blue glass cleaner wobbled, tipped over the edge, and hit the floor with a loud, hollow clunk. It rolled in a half circle, coming to a stop near his chair. Everything stopped for a second. The typing at the nearby desks paused. A few people looked up. He turned and looked at her. His eyes were cold and hard. He didn't apologize. He didn't help pick it up. He just stared at her, as if the cart, the bottle, and she herself were all just one big nuisance that had gotten in his way. "Watch it," he said, his voice low but so sharp it cut through the quiet. "You people are always in the way. Just do your job and be invisible." He looked her up and down, from her sensible shoes to her blue uniform. A sneer touched his lips. "You're rubbish at both." The words hung in the air. They were meant to hurt, to make her feel small. They were meant to remind her of her place. For a long moment, she just stood there. Inside her chest, her heart beat a steady, calm rhythm. Her training was a wall between her and the insult. She didn't react. She didn't glare back. She simply became smaller. She let her shoulders curve in. She dropped her gaze from his face to the floor, to the spilled bottle. She took a slow, quiet breath. Then she moved. She bent down, her knees cracking a little, and picked up the plastic bottle. She placed it carefully back into its spot on the cart. Her movements were slow, peaceful almost. She gave a tiny, almost invisible nod. Not to him, but to the floor. An acceptance of the scolding. Then, without a single word, she took the handle of her cart and pushed it forward. The one squeaky will start it up again. Squeak, squeak, squeak. As she moved away from him, towards the next row of desks, he watched her go for a second, that sneer still on his face. He felt better. He had taken his bad mood and put it on someone who couldn't fight back. Someone who was paid to take it. He smoothed his shirt, sat down at his desk, and forgot about her completely. He had no idea what he had just done. He thought he'd just kicked a cleaning cart. He didn't know he had just kicked a hornet's nest. For the rest of the morning, she was the picture of a woman who had been put in her place. Her movements were even slower, more careful. When she had to pass by his desk again to empty a bin, she gave it a wide, wide berth, almost pressing herself against the far wall. Her eyes never left the floor. Inside, her mind was a quiet, focused machine. The incident played on a loop, but not the insult. She was cataloging the facts. Time: 10:47 a.m. Location: aisle between cubicle rows B and C. Subject: officer. Visibly agitated prior. Trigger: minor frustration, food stain. Action: verbal aggression. Physical contact with agency property, the cart. Witnesses: 4. The clerk at desk B12. The 2 data entry staff at B15 and B16. The senior officer who looked up from his office doorway. Asterisk reaction of witnesses. Brief attention, followed by deliberate avoidance. Established pattern of subjects intimidating behavior. This was no longer just background noise. This was a data point, a very interesting one. Angry people made mistakes. Bullies who felt untouchable got sloppy. He had just shown her who he was when he thought no one important was watching. Her lunch break was in a small, windowless janitor's closet on the ground floor. It was stocked with mops and buckets and smelled faintly of bleach. To anyone checking, Maria the cleaner was eating her sad sandwich alone, as usual. She locked the door from the inside. From a hidden panel in the side of her cleaning cart, she removed a small, rugged tablet computer. Her fingers, which seemed rough and worn during her shifts, now moved with quick, precise taps. She entered a secure connection. A chat window opened. On the other end was her handler, a man she knew only by the code name David. Subject exhibited targeted aggression today. She typed. The words looked cold on the screen. Unprovoked. Verbal and minor physical escalation against my cover. Motivations appear to be general frustration and perceived low status of target. Recommend elevating subject's priority for financial/activity review. This level of entitlement often has a source. The reply came a moment later. Noted. Incident logged. Proceed with scheduled trash retrieval from his office after hours. Priority elevated. Be careful. She took a bite of her sandwich. It was tasteless. Her mind was already on the next step. The real treasure wasn't in what people said out loud. It was in what they threw away. The workday ended. The office emptied out, people laughing and chatting as they headed to the elevators, leaving behind the stale air and the faint glow of computer monitors on sleep mode. She waited, doing the bathrooms on the other side of the floor, the sound of her mop sloshing in the bucket echoing in the tiled room. Finally, silence. The deep, empty silence of a government building after hours. She pushed her cart to the row of private offices. His office was the third one on the left. The door was locked. This was expected. From her cart, she took a large, heavy black plastic bag, the kind for industrial trash bins. She also had her ring of master keys, provided by the building's actual, unknowing maintenance company. The key turned with a soft click. She didn't turn on the main light. The light from the hallway was enough. His office was messy, but an organized mess. Stacks of files, a couple of framed certificates on the wall, a fancy pen set. It smelled like old coffee and ambition. The trash bin by his desk was full. She knelt down and, instead of just tying the bag and taking it, she performed her real task. She put on a pair of thin latex gloves. With careful, efficient motions, she began to sort through the trash, item by item. A crushed paper coffee cup. A torn-up sticky note with a grocery list. A printout of an email about office parking permits. She photographed each item with a small camera before placing it into her black bag. Most of it was useless. Then, near the bottom, she found it was a crumpled piece of paper from a small notepad. It had been ripped off, balled up tightly, and thrown away with force. She smoothed it out on the floor. It wasn't a case file. It was a personal note, written in a hurried, angry scrawl. The handwriting was sloppy, pressing hard into the paper. Meeting went bad. They're not happy. Saying the last delivery was short. How can it be short? I counted it myself. This is a shakedown. Told them no more talks until I see the full amount. This is getting too hot. There was no name. No signature. But there was a number. A time, 9 p.m., and what looked like the name of a diner. A cheap one, over on the east side, known for its sticky floors and not asking questions. She felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. This wasn't about office politics or a bad temper anymore. This was about a delivery, about being short, about a shakedown. She took several clear, close-up photos of the note. Then, following procedure, she placed the original note into a separate, clear evidence bag and sealed it. The rest of the trash went into the big black bag. She tied it off and heaved it onto her cart. She left the office exactly as she found it, locking the door behind her. The squeak of her cart echoed in the dark hallway. The only sound was that wheel and the steady beat of her own heart. Back in the janitor's closet, she transmitted the photos. The message to her handler was short. Strike. Found note in subject's trash. Discussing a delivery and a dispute over payment. Meeting location and time noted. This is beyond corruption. Smells like trafficking or smuggling. Request immediate analysis and surveillance on the diner. She leaned back against the cool concrete wall, closing her eyes for a moment. The face of the angry officer flashed in her mind. His sneer. His words. "You're rubbish." She thought of the note now safe in her evidence bag. He had thrown it away, thinking it was garbage. He had looked at her and seen nothing but a small, hard smile touched her lips in the darkness. He was right about one thing. Someone in that room was rubbish. But it wasn't her. And soon, very soon, he was going to find out exactly what he had thrown away. The next morning, everything looked the same. The sun came up. The building hummed to life. Maria the cleaner pushed her squeaky cart down the hallway, her head down. But nothing was the same. When she walked past his office, she could feel it. A tension, like the air before a thunderstorm. He was in there on the phone again. But his voice was different. It wasn't the loud, angry bluster from yesterday. It was low. It was careful. He was almost whispering. "I don't know what you're talking about," he was saying. A long pause. "No. It's not here. Maybe you misplaced it." Another pause, longer this time. His voice got even quieter, tighter. "Don't threaten me. We both have a lot to lose." She kept moving, not slowing her step for a second. Her face showed nothing, but her mind was screaming. He's looking for the note. He knows it's gone. The rest of her morning was a performance. She had to be perfectly normal. She emptied bins, wiped desks, and made herself invisible, all while feeling his nervous energy radiating from behind his closed door. He came out once, walking quickly to the break room. His eyes swept over the office, checking faces, checking trash cans. He looked worried, really worried. Her lunch in the janitor's closet was not a break. It was a briefing. On her secure tablet, her handler had sent new information. The note had been a goldmine. The diner was now under surveillance. The license plates of cars in the lot last night had been run. One name had popped up, a person with known connections to a group that moved people across borders illegally. This wasn't just about stealing money or leaking office gossip anymore. This was about human lives. The handler's message was clear. "You are now the point of the spear." He is compromised and nervous. A nervous person makes more mistakes. Observe everything. The smallest detail might be the key. She finished her sandwich and went back to work. The afternoon dragged on. She could see the change in him. The angry, puffed-up bully was gone. In his place was a man jumping at shadows. Every time the office door opened, his head snapped up. When the phone on his desk rang, he stared at it for 2 rings before picking it up. She was cleaning the glass on a fire extinguisher case across from his cubicle when it happened. He was trying to look busy, typing slowly on his computer. A younger officer, a cheerful guy who always said hello to the cleaners, walked over to his desk. "Hey," the younger officer said, holding out a small, crumpled ball of paper. "This was under my desk. Has your handwriting on it. Is it important?" The officer froze. She saw the blood drain from his face. He stared at the paper ball like it was a poisonous spider. He snatched it from the younger man's hand. "It's nothing," he said, his voice rough. "Just old notes. Thanks." He shoved the paper into his pants pocket, his movements jerky. The younger officer shrugged, gave a friendly smile, and walked away. The officer waited until he was gone, then pulled the paper ball back out. He uncrumpled it quickly, desperately. She could see the relief flood his features. It was the right note. He must have thrown away a second draft, and the first one had missed the bin. That he let out a breath he'd been holding for hours. He leaned back in his chair and actually smiled. Thin smile. The worry was gone. The bully was coming back. He thought he was safe. He looked across the room, his eyes landing on her. She was just a shape, a woman in a blue uniform rubbing a streak off the glass. His smile didn't fade. It was a smile of pure contempt. He had been scared over nothing. The world was back in its proper order. The cleaners were nobodies, and he was in control. He crumpled the note again, walked over to the large central shredder by the printer, and dropped it in. The machine whirred and gnashed its teeth. He watched until the last piece disappeared. He walked back to his desk, his step lighter. He didn't know that the real note, the one he had thrown away yesterday, was already in an FBI evidence locker. He didn't know that his little moment of relief was being watched and understood. She finished the glass and moved her cart along. Inside, she was calm. She had seen a full cycle of his behavior. Panic, fear, and then the return of his arrogance once he thought the danger was past. That arrogance was his weakness. He believed he was smarter than everyone else in the room, especially the people he thought were beneath him. As she pushed her cart towards the supply closet for the day, she passed his desk one last time. He was on the phone again, and his voice was back to its normal, irritated volume. Yeah, it's handled," he was saying. "Just a false alarm. Nothing to worry about." She looked straight ahead, her face a blank wall. But for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself a single, clear thought. "You're right," she thought, the words echoing in the quiet space of her own mind. "It is handled, but not by you." She turned the corner, the squeak of her cart fading down the hallway. The workday was over for the office staff. But for her, the most important part was just beginning. They had the note, they had the diner, and now they had a man who thought he was safe. That was the most dangerous kind of person to be. The next 2 days were a slow, careful dance. She was Maria the cleaner, but her senses were stretched as tight as a wire. The note had been the crack in the wall. Now the whole team was working to widen it, to see what was hidden behind it. Her job was to be a shadow, to listen, and to collect. Every piece of trash from his office was now a potential piece of the puzzle. The team had set up a secure process. She no longer sorted through it in the janitor's closet. Every evening, the entire contents of his office trash bin, and the small one by his desk, were placed into a special sealed container. It looked like a normal, heavy-duty trash bag, but it was lined. It was collected by a different janitor from a different company, an FBI agent who worked the night shift. In a lab across town, every coffee-stained napkin, every crumpled receipt, every torn corner of paper was examined. They were building a picture of his life outside the office. And it was an expensive picture. The receipts told a story. Fancy dinners at steakhouses a government salary couldn't easily afford. Bottles of wine that cost more than a week's groceries. A recent, large cash withdrawal from an ATM near the dodgy diner. But the real clue came from something he probably didn't even think about. It was a small, torn-off piece of a parking garage ticket. It was from a garage downtown, not near the government building. It was from last week, late in the evening. On its own, it meant nothing. But when the team cross-referenced the date and time with the city's traffic cameras near that garage, they found his car, and they saw it wasn't alone. His sedan pulled out of the garage. A dark van, with no side windows in the back, pulled out right behind him. They traveled together for 3 blocks before turning off in different directions. The van's plates were traced to a shell company, a company that had been flagged in other, older investigations for moving people. The pieces were starting to fit together, but they needed the centerpiece. They needed to know what he was giving them or what he was getting from them. The delivery he mentioned in the note. She had to get closer. She had to see his computer screen, his paperwork, when he wasn't in the room. It was a huge risk. If he caught her looking, the entire operation could collapse. But the handler gave the green light. "He's gotten comfortable again," the message read. "His arrogance is back. Use it." Her opportunity came on a Thursday afternoon. A fire drill was scheduled for the whole building. It was a monthly nuisance. Alarms would blare. Everyone would have to file down the stairs and stand outside on the sidewalk for 20 minutes. When the sharp, screeching alarm sounded, the office erupted in the usual groans and grumbles. Chairs pushed back, people grabbed their jackets and phones, and started moving towards the exits in a slow, chatting crowd. She was in the break room, cleaning the microwave. She waited. She watched him. He was one of the last to leave, looking annoyed. He locked his computer screen with a tap of a key, shoved his phone in his pocket, and followed the crowd out, not even glancing her way. The alarm was still screaming. The building was required to empty. Even the cleaners. She had a short window, maybe 5 minutes before a floor warden did a final check. She moved fast. Out of the break room, down the now empty hallway to his office. The door was unlocked. She slipped inside and closed the door. The alarm was muffled here, a distant pulse. She didn't touch his computer. A touch could leave a trace, could change a setting. Instead, she looked at what was on his desk. A case file was open. It wasn't the one on top. It was underneath another folder. She carefully lifted the corner. It was a removal order. A document to deport someone. The name was a young man from another country. The photo showed a scared face. But the paperwork was wrong. Dates were inconsistent. A key stamp from a reviewing judge was missing. It was a flawed document. It should have been kicked back, corrected. But a handwritten sticky note was attached to it. In his writing, it said, "Priority. Expedite. No second review." Her blood ran cold. This was it. This was the delivery. He wasn't smuggling money or drugs. He was smuggling people. He was using his power, his access to the system, to fast-track the deportation of specific individuals. People the trafficking ring wanted gone, or maybe people they wanted to snatch once they were in the system, vulnerable and in transit. It was a sickening thought. She pulled a tiny camera from a hidden seam in her uniform sleeve. It looked like a button. She took several pictures of the file, the photo, the handwritten note. The flash was off. It was silent. From downstairs, she could hear the faint sound of a megaphone. The warden was rounding people up. Time was up. She stepped back, making sure everything on the desk was exactly as she found it. She glanced one last time at the photo of the young man on the file. His eyes were wide. She memorized that face. Then she was out the door, moving quickly but quietly down the hallway towards the stairwell door. She pushed it open and joined the tail end of the crowd heading down the stairs, blending in perfectly, just another employee in a blue uniform. Outside, the sun was bright. People stood in clusters, laughing and complaining about the interruption. He was over by a tree, smoking a cigarette and checking his phone. Looking bored, she stood off to the side by herself, the picture of a quiet cleaner waiting for the signal to go back to work. Inside her sleeve, the tiny camera felt warm against her skin. Inside her mind, the image of that young man's face was burned. She looked at the officer, standing there so confidently, thinking his secrets were safe behind a locked computer screen and a shredder. He took a long drag of his cigarette and blew the smoke out in a slow, lazy stream. He had no idea that in the last 5 minutes, while he stood in the sun, the walls of his little world had just closed in another few inches. The cleaner he had called rubbish had just found the key to his kingdom. And it was a kingdom built on the lives of people who had no one to protect them. Until now, the fire drill changed everything. Before, they were watching a suspicious man. Now they had a target and they had a clock. That deportation order with the young man's face on it had a date. A hearing was scheduled in just 4 days. After that, he could be moved, lost in a system that this officer was twisting for his own gain. In the janitor's closet that evening, the message from her handler was urgent. Photos confirmed. Subject is flagging individuals for fast-track removal. Pattern matches 2 other lost cases from last quarter. We believe the network intercepts them during transport. This is the mechanism. We move in 72 hours. Your role is critical. Keep him calm. Keep him in the dark. Keep him calm. She almost laughed. Her job was to be invisible, to be nothing. Now she had to actively manage his emotions without him knowing. It was the most delicate part of the dance yet. The next morning, she became a student of his mood. She watched him from the corners of the room, timing her movements. She noticed he liked a clean desk in the morning. So, she made sure to get to his office first, to empty his bin and wipe the surface before he arrived, leaving it spotless. She saw he hated the sound of her squeaky cart. So, she took a minute to quietly oil the wheel, not enough to silence it completely, but enough to dull the sharpest squeak. It was a small thing, but small things mattered to a man like him. She was giving him small gifts of peace, without him ever knowing they came from her. He seemed more focused than nervous now. The deportation order was moving forward. He had a purpose. He was back to being the important officer, pushing papers and making calls. She heard him on the phone once, his voice smooth and professional. Yes, the Morales case is prioritized. Transport will be arranged directly after the hearing. Standard procedure. The words were like ice down her spine. Standard procedure. He made it sound so normal. Her own work intensified. Every piece of paper she retrieved was now screamingly important. A phone number scribbled on the back of a business card. A printout of a map with a small X near a remote airstrip. She didn't know what it all meant, but the team downtown was putting it together like a horrifying map. 2 days before the hearing, something new happened. A different man came to the office. He wasn't in a uniform. He wore a cheap suit and carried a briefcase. He didn't look like a government worker. He had a cold, flat face and eyes that didn't smile. He went straight to the officer's private office and closed the door. She was cleaning the carpet in the hallway with a portable vacuum. The machine's noise was her cover. She moved it slowly right past the closed door. The vacuum was loud, but not loud enough to drown out the raised voices inside. "You're sure it's clean?" It was the cold man's voice, sharp as a knife. "Of course I'm sure." The officer snapped back, but there was a thread of fear under the anger. "I handled it. It's just a simple removal." "Simple? Nothing is simple. Our friends are nervous. The last package caused problems. There won't be any problems this time. The route is set. The paperwork is perfect." A long pause. Then the cold man's voice, lower now. "It better be. For your sake. The balance is still due. After this one. No more delays." She kept vacuuming, her hands steady on the machine. The conversation confirmed everything. The package was the young man. The balance due was his payment. This was business. Ugly, cruel business. The office door opened. The cold man walked out, not looking at anyone. He just left. A minute later, the officer emerged. His face was pale, and a faint sheen of sweat was on his forehead. All his earlier confidence was gone, replaced by a raw, shaky fear. He had just been reminded who was really in charge, and it wasn't him. He walked back to his desk and sat down heavily. He didn't move. He just stared at his hands. This was the moment. A man who was scared was a man who made mistakes. But a man who was terrified could do anything. He could run, he could destroy evidence, he could warn the others. She had to fix it. She had to give him back just a tiny bit of his false confidence. She waited about 15 minutes. Then, she pushed her cart near his desk. She was there to empty his small trash bin. As she bent down, she purposely let her cleaning rag fall from her cart. It landed softly on the floor near his feet. She reached for it slowly. As she did, she looked up at him just for a second. She made her eyes wide, a little frightened. She let him see the fear he loved to see. She quickly looked down again, snatched the rag, and backed away with a small, submissive nod. It was a performance. A tiny play just for him. The message was, "I am still afraid of you. You are still powerful here." She saw him watch her. She saw his chest rise and fall. He watched her retreat, the quiet, frightened cleaner. And something in his posture changed. The shoulders came back just a little. The chin went up. He was the king of this little castle again. The cold man from the outside world was gone. Here, he was still in control. He turned back to his computer, a little of the color returning to his face. The crisis of fear had passed. He was back to work, thinking he had everything handled. She pushed her cart away, her heart finally slowing down. It had worked. He was calm enough to stay the course, to walk right into the trap they were setting. That night, the final plan was relayed to her. The hearing for the young man was the trigger. It would proceed to avoid tipping off the wider network. But it would be surrounded by agents. The transport after the hearing would be intercepted. And at the same moment, here in the office, they would take the officer. Her part was almost over. She just had to be Maria for one more day, to push her cart, to empty the bins, and to watch the final act of a man who thought he was the smartest person in the room that he had called her rubbish. He had kicked her cart. He had looked right through her. In less than 24 hours, he was going to learn the hard way that you should always be nice to the person who cleans up your mess. Because sometimes, they're the only one who sees what the mess really is. The day arrived. It was a Tuesday, just like the day he had kicked her cart. The morning felt normal. The sun came up. People arrived with their coffee. The office filled with the usual sounds. But she could feel the difference. It was in the air, a kind of waiting silence underneath the noise. She pushed her cart, doing her normal rounds. She emptied the bin in the break room. She wiped down the tables. Everything was slow and careful, just like every other day. The officer was at his desk. He looked tired but focused. He was dressed a little more sharply than usual. He kept checking his watch. Today was the hearing for the young man. Today was the day his delivery was supposed to happen. He was nervous, but it was the nervous energy of a man waiting for a big payday, mixed with the fear from the cold man's visit. He didn't look at her. He was too busy with his own thoughts. She worked her way around the office. She noticed small things. A new agent she didn't recognize was sitting at a vacant desk, pretending to review files. He was young, with a calm face. He was one of hers. Over by the window, a woman from the records department, who usually wore bright colors, was dressed in a dull gray suit. Another one. The office was being quietly surrounded from the inside. The clock ticked past 10, then past 11. The hearing was happening now in a courtroom across town. She could imagine it. The young man, confused and scared. The judge. And in the back, looking like spectators, several agents from her team, waiting. Just after 11:30, the officer's phone buzzed. It was a text message. He looked at it, and a small, tight smile of relief appeared on his face. He typed a quick reply, then put the phone down. He leaned back in his chair and actually closed his eyes for a second, the picture of a man who had just finished a difficult job. That was the signal. The hearing was over. The order was signed. The trap was about to spring. She pushed her cart slowly towards the supply closet near the main elevators. This was her final position. From here, she could see the whole floor. Her hands were dry. Her breathing was even. She felt a deep, solid calm that it started quietly. The main elevator door opened with a soft ding. For people walked out. 2 men and 2 women. They wore neat, serious business clothes. They walked with a purpose that was different from the lazy pace of the government office. One of them was her handler, the man she knew as David. He looked like any other mid-level manager. They walked straight towards the officer's desk. He was still leaning back in his chair, his eyes open now, looking at his computer screen with satisfaction. He didn't see them coming until they were standing right in front of him. The office got quiet. The typing stopped. All the little office sounds died away. "Officer," her handler said, his voice polite but firm, carrying in the silence. "We need to have a word. Please come with us." The officer blinked, confused, then annoyed. "Who are you? What is this? I'm in the middle of my work." He tried to sound angry, but there was a crack of fear in it. The handler didn't raise his voice. "We're from the Inspector General's office. We have some questions regarding procedural irregularities. It will be easier if we talk downstairs." "Procedural irregularities?" The officer spat, standing up now, his face turning red. "This is ridiculous. I want to see your identification. I want to call my supervisor." The handler nodded calmly. He pulled out his badge, but it wasn't an IG badge. He held it low for only the officer to see. The officer's eyes locked on it. She saw his face change. The red anger drained away, leaving a sick, pale white. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He had seen the FBI seal. "This is a mistake," he whispered, but the fight was gone from his voice. "That's what we're here to figure out," the handler said. "Now, please." It wasn't a request. It was then, as the officer took a shaky step away from his desk, that his eyes finally swept the room. They passed over the staring faces of his colleagues, over the agents by his desk, and then they landed on her. She was standing by her cleaning cart, near the elevator. She wasn't hiding. She was just watching, her hands resting on the handle of the cart. Their eyes met. For a second, he just stared, not understanding. He saw the blue uniform, the quiet posture, Maria the cleaner. Then he saw her eyes. They weren't looking down at the floor. They were looking right at him, clear and steady and cold. There was no fear in them, no submission. There was only a quiet, final certainty. His brain couldn't make the pieces fit. The frightened cleaner, the FBI badge, the trap that had closed around him. It all swirled in his head. And then it clicked. She saw the moment it happened. His eyes widened in pure, horrified shock. His jaw went slack. "You." The word was silent on his lips. She didn't nod. She didn't smile. She just held his gaze, letting him feel the full weight of his mistake. Letting him understand that every word, every sneer, every kick of the cart had been seen, had been noted, and had helped bring him to this moment. The handler took his arm gently but firmly. "Let's go." The officer let himself be turned. He was broken. The arrogant, angry man was gone, replaced by a hollow shell. He walked, stumbling slightly, towards the elevator, surrounded by the agents. He didn't look back. The elevator doors closed on them. For a moment, the office was utterly still. Then, a buzz of confused conversation started up, full of whispers and questions. She looked down at her cart. Her work here was done. She pushed it slowly towards the janitor's closet for the last time. Inside, she took off the blue uniform shirt with the Maria badge. Underneath, she wore a simple black t-shirt. She folded the uniform neatly and placed it in the bottom of the cart. She took one last look at the closet, at the mops and the smell of bleach. Then she walked out, leaving the cart behind. She didn't take the service elevator. She walked straight through the main office, past the cubicles where people were now huddled together, talking in excited, shocked voices, and no one noticed her. No one saw the woman in the black shirt walking out. They were all too busy talking about the officer who had just been led away. She stepped out into the bright afternoon sun. The air outside felt clean. A block away, a regular car was waiting. She got in the passenger side. Her handler was driving. "He's in custody," David said, pulling into traffic. "The transport was intercepted an hour ago. The young man is safe. We have the cold man in the suit, too. Picked him up at the diner. It's over." She nodded, watching the city go by. She thought of the officer's face in that last second of understanding. The shock, the humiliation. "He called me rubbish," she said, her voice quiet. David glanced at her. "What do you call someone who looks at a person and only sees garbage?" She thought about it for a moment. She thought of the young man who was safe. She thought of the others they would now find because of this. "I call them wrong," she said. And as the car drove away from the government building, she allowed herself a small, real smile. It was over, and she had cleaned up the whole mess.